Hi, my name is Sabu Francis. I'm an architect, I'm a researcher, I'm a teacher, and I'm also a software developer. And last 30 years, I've spent a fair amount of time in all these four areas where I have diligently worked on each of these aspects of architecture. And past 3 years, you must have seen there have been various announcements which I've made about a software called TAD. It's a design software for architects, and this is something which I was using in my office. I developed it for my own office, for my own practice. Then I used it in almost all my projects, and finally in 2017, on a Republic Day, January 26, 2017, I released it as a freeware for the entire world. Now, one of the questions which people ask me is, why is this free? I mean, is there something wrong in it, or is it something which is crippled? It does not have all the features. What's the reason for it to be free? So I thought that I should make this video to clarify that we are entering a new stage of this information era. We are in the information world. It is very different from the industrial world which was there earlier. Okay, we have entered information era sometime after the Second World War. The end of the Second World War, you can say technically we ended up in the information era because Alan Turing came up with his theories on computing and the work which he did for solving the problem of the Enigma machine was quite an important milestone in the way information gets handled. So ever since, you can say last 80 years or so, we have been into this information era, and now, last few years actually, we are entering possibly a new stage in that information era where we are going to make a choice between two different ways by which we can bequeath a better world to our children and our grandchildren, various generation who will come after us. And this new way of how value gets deposited in the world, I think we all need to understand. And my work, TAD, has to be seen from that context rather than saying that, oh, here is one new software and it is free and okay, let's start using it. So take a step back, and I hope you can listen to the intensity of this particular talk and understand what is happening here. Let me build a background, because another question which people ask is that why is it an architect? Why is that architect getting involved in computing? I mean, we have a lot of work, and mind you, I was a practicing architect. It's only last few years I've been concentrating mainly on this software, and so that's a very important backdrop you should know. So I've been looking at architecture as an information device. Architecture has been, if you really reflect on it, has been one of the most important information device which humans have actually invented. So it's not just that a building makes us comfortable from the sense of the environment around us, but the built environment is supposed to reduce our information load, the kind of things which we have to hold in our memory. For example, we don't really live in one gigantic room with all our stuff in that big room, right? And if our houses have got different rooms, and each room has got its own furniture, its own cupboards, and the cupboard has got its own shelves, and the shelves may have boxes, and the boxes may have smaller containers in it. So we actually divide and conquer the massive amount of information which we deal with into convenient spaces at different scales, and thereby making our life that much more easy to understand. So that's why we like going back to our house after a busy day, because we know where things are around and nothing is going to overwhelm us. So this aspect of looking at architecture as an information management device is where I come from. And when internet came into our lives, I was very curious to know that here is another new kind of space which is emerging. It's like a large spaceship above us, floating above us, and we are also using terminologies like site under construction or let's visit that site. And the word cyberspace used to be used quite a lot. So we are yearning for a different kind of space because we were earlier having only one kind of space. And that's the connection for an architect to start understanding what is driving all this and what are the things which would put all these things together. So I actually did a fair amount of work even on the internet along with my own practice. So I developed one of the world's first wiki system, which was also a free wiki system. I developed what is known as a content management system, and I made one of the first PDF creation systems, and many such different software I was experimenting with, working on, and then putting it out on the internet and putting it in front of people and taking notes on how they are actually going around organizing the information. So this work about TAD did not come from a vacuum or a hobby or something like that. It actually went through quite a trial by fire kind of process where I actually had to really solve a lot of very tricky problems in the way we organize our information. So we need to ask ourselves, like I just said, we need to ask ourselves, what is the future which we are going to bequeath to our children and our great grandchildren? That's the question, and I won't get tired of repeating myself on that, because at this stage, internet is now about 20-30 years old, and it has started exposing its flaws of where things could go wrong. And the way we deposit value, it was assumed that it has to happen in a particular way, which was a legacy of probably from the industrial age, and it went into the information age. But now, let me give you some insight about what the future may bring in. During the industrial era, it was assumed that there is one kind of central ownership of value. Like it's like, I may be Henry Ford or I may be a large company like General Electric, and I have all the resources to then provide value to quite a large number of people, probably half the world I can probably cater to. And that's where the principles of capitalism and all started working, and it probably made some sense, and it did take the world to another level. But the central ownership of information, now we are realizing that is creating a lot of headaches. And if there is an entity which says, okay, I'll take all the information, all the complex parts, and then I'll simplify it for you, and I'll create a software for you or whatever, and then you can take the software and then use it. That has now started seeing a kind of alternative has started coming into place. And we need to choose which of these two alternatives we think we should really encourage, because after all, the things which we do is what's going to precipitate the future. We need to create the future which we desire. So I'm going to lay down a few arguments, and then you can check for yourself whether this makes sense. According to me, I think it makes a lot of sense, and you can actually in that lot of sense is the reason why TAD is being offered free and will always be remaining free. However, it doesn't mean that I don't make money, or the system won't make money, or you won't make money, or you have to do something which is so unusual that everybody has to do their stuff free or something of that sort. So let me kind of unravel this misconception about why should TAD be free, is there something wrong with it, and things like that. So we should start actually a long time back, and we should start understanding how humans go around changing the world around us. Now, Victor Papanek in his book Design for the Real World came up with a very sharp observation, which actually, frankly, all of us know this, but we don't really, look at it and say, okay, there is something here which is really important, and are we glossing over this? And what he said was that humans are the only animals, when facing problems in the world around us, will change the world around us, and sometimes change it pretty drastically and pretty emphatically, and without even knowledge of how the ripple effects of those changes may create to the rest of the world. Whereas all other animals, they leave a very minimal footprint on the natural world. And if they do make some changes in the world, like a bird will build a nest, or some animal will burrow a hole into the ground, and so on and so forth, what happens is that those small changes actually fit into a very nice tapestry of a gigantic jigsaw puzzle, where each animal contributes its own little position and its own influence in the physical world around, and everything is gently locking into each other, and the jigsaw puzzle is all very nicely fitted together, and that's how the conception of the world, which I think is a pretty reasonable understanding what the world is. Accepting that humans come in, and then we are like the proverbial bull in the china shop, and we go around saying that we can't molt our skin, we can't grow fur on our skin, we can't migrate, we can't hibernate, and so on. And we say, okay, we'll change the world around us, and in that process we end up creating, quite a lot of times we end up creating fair amount of havoc. Now, this is something I may be preaching to the choir. I think all of us know this broadly. I was just kind of dramatizing it. What was the response which nature gave us? And there is one response which, according to linguists like Noam Chomsky and others, they say that we have this faculty of speech, of language, and which came as a biological mutation into us something around 60,000 to 100,000 years back, is what Noam Chomsky says in his talks. And a fair amount of linguists know and kind of have a consensus that possibly that's what has happened. We are the only animals which can talk. Okay. But evolutionarily, 60,000, 100,000 is just a small little spark when you consider millions of years. Right? So the capability of speech came into us very recently. Okay. And this capability of taking some parts of the speech and writing down on some intermediate medium for later on people to come and read and recreate the speech, that came only about 5,000 years or so back. So you must understand where I'm coming from, that here is an animal which can really create havoc in the world around us. And nature gave us the faculty of speech and talk and language. Why? Because possibly to give us the capability to exercise the brain just behind our forehead here, which they call as the prefrontal cortex, which gives us the capacity to plan ahead, and all other primates, they have a sloping forehead. Which they don't have that kind of capability to plan ahead and all. So we have this way of using our thoughts and expressing some part of our thoughts as language, so we can kind of reflect over what we may do, and we can talk it out to others, and we can argue it out with others and debate with others about what could be the ripple effects which we would possibly create in the world around us. But as I told just some time back, this kind of changes in the biology of a human being is pretty recent. Okay, so we are not good at it, frankly. That's what I'm arriving at. We are not yet become good at it. We don't really leave a minimal footprint in the world around and participate in that dynamic jigsaw puzzle which I was explaining. Each animal is handling a nice little sensitive part of their jigsaw contribution to that jigsaw puzzle and fitting in that particular piece as they leave their impact on the world. But humans don't do that. We have to argue it out and discuss and all that, and we have still not got this part right at all. So why am I introducing all this is because architecture is a result of this kind of discussions. Think of it like I say a tribe in the Amazon rainforest or in the Andamans. There is a tribe who's not yet they have. The Indian government has said that nobody should go to that island. They are preserving that particular tribe without bringing any external influence or from the world outside. Now, if you look at these small tribes, the way they go around changing their environment and make their architecture would be with this kind of discussions and stories and narrations and arguments and whatnot, and spirituality and religion or whatever which they will use to make sure that they are responsibly handling that part of the jigsaw puzzle. But by and large, a lot of us have lost that capability. The way information comes into us is coming from so many different ways and from so many faraway places that it is gone beyond the control of a single mind. So we according to Stephen Covey, he says that we model problems twice, once in our mind and once out in the world outside. So when we put things in our mind, we are supposed to use language and discuss with our neighbors and our family members and see what the impact could be. But that thing is gone beyond our mind. We are now making huge constructions, huge cities, and there are influx of people from the rural areas into the urban areas. There are different specialization which don't really talk very well with each other. So the concept of that there is this one special mind who can actually handle all this, I think we should really give up that. I don't think it is the capacity or the capability of one individual minds to really put things together, solve it for the whole world, and say, okay, now these are the interventions which we are going to do to the world, and we have really sat through and understood how that jigsaw puzzle will work out and how we will contribute to that natural jigsaw puzzle. That's not yet happened, and it will take a little bit time, and that's the kind of future which I would like to precipitate, and I hope you would join me in that. So in that process, when we are saying that when we are handling the problems of the world, and of course our own problem of making money and surviving is also part of that set of problems of the world, right? So all that together, if you put it, we now have to think that what if we are to rely on some central control of all information, like large organizations writing software and whatnot and tools, and say that this is what you should all do, because left to by yourself you can't do it. That's been a story which has been sold to us, and a lot of us believe that. They say, yeah, I know, I'm a small guy, I'll have to accept that guy's software, and I'm just an architect, how can I just do anything? Or any device or anything. But last 30-40 years, in fact, there's been this movement known as the open source movement, where people are saying, no, you know what? You need not have central control as such. Okay, you can start talking about real big problems, and instead of having the faculty of writing to deposit and start discussions with people who are not yet there in front of you in your conversation. Luckily for us, some real clever people came up with the concept called a computer. And a computer has to be looked upon as a writing device, as a specialized linguistic device. In fact, computers, if you study the history of how Alan Turing solved the problem of the Enigma machine and all that, it was seriously a focusedly linguistic challenge which was getting solved. So even today, computers, before you start looking at it as computer software, you have to really start looking at computers as a device which can handle symbols and organize symbols and process them, so our communication can be a lot more accurate if we choose to do so. I mean, we can still make it very obtuse and confusing, but that opportunity is there. A computer can really deposit some kind of a written matter if you put written in quotation marks. It's not writing as in physical writing, but you're still writing into a computer in such a way that it really helps us in that reflecting on what are we going to go and do to the world. Like the way I was explaining some time back, that the nature gave us the faculty of language, so that as we are thinking through a problem, we express some of that concerns and our possible solutions in form of words, and that tribe will sit together and figure out what is the next step to be done. That faculty of planning can become really more accurate and powerful if we do it through a computer, because now the computer is kind of extending. There's a glimmer of a chance that computer can extend our capability to communicate reasonably accurately to the world outside. So that's where we are poised, and we should start thinking about this new nature of how information needs to be processed. At this point, let me tell something else about how things used to happen during the Industrial Revolution, for example. And it's a pretty well-known theory. It's nothing which I've invented. If you read Karl Marx's book on capitalism, where he explains how capitalism works, more than, I'm not getting into whether communism is right or capitalism is right. That's a different discussion. But what his book was talking about is how does capitalism really work? So, and it's a very common knowledge. It's not really a criticism. What it says is that in capitalism, when you are depositing value, that agency or entity or a person, whoever it is, who is able to influence things more at the source of a chain of events, that person can be extremely influential on how the rest of the chain of events would work. Let me explain what I just said. Say you are the owner of a very large manufacturing company which manufactures lathe machines, not ordinary lathe machines, but gigantic ones, and you use those lathe machines to create the machinery of other factories, that size lathe machines and numerically controlled machines and all that. Think that you are in that you're the owner of that company. Now, since your machinery is used to generate the parts of other factories down the line, you obviously have a great influence on how the economics of the next set of factories would work, right? So if I say I'm a steel manufacturing company, large steel manufacturing company, I would have even more influence, because I can even influence that lathe making machine, because I'm going to provide the steel for that machine itself. So there's a whole daisy chain, or you can say a food chain of control and influence which works in the industrial complex when we were in the industrial era. Right, and this is pretty well known. That's why people who own mines and all, they are very powerful people, because it starts with that, or people who own large tracts of agricultural land and is a huge landlord and can grow a lot of crops. They are all very influential because they can actually handle the rest of the chain of events which is happening there. And any kind of government controls which come in between and give some additional power to people, and things will start getting upset in that whole daisy chain of events. So this is pretty well known. What has happened is the society is becoming more and more into abstract areas. So what was tangible? So I'm manufacturing this, or I'm manufacturing this microphone. These are all tangible things. But in the information era, we are now talking about a daisy chain of control of data or information, right? And the entities and companies who take central control of that particular pieces of information, they obviously would wield their influence on the next set of industries or companies which is not as big as the main source. Again, to simplify things, any company which manufactures, if that is a word, which which brings out an operating system of a computer is very, very influential, because all the other software developer has to bow in front of that operating system because they have no choice. It's exactly like what was happening in the industrial age, where the factories down the line had to bow in front of that large factory which made those large lathe machines, right? On similar lines, you will see that is how Apple is very influential, or Microsoft is very influential, because they are at the mother source. They make the mother machines. Okay. In every sphere of our concerns as human beings, whether it's in using computers for games, for example, or if you're a doctor, you'll find that this chain of events of who controls what in that whole chain would be based on who's controlling the information as centrally as much as possible, with wielding a lot of influence on the rest of the things which is happening there. Luckily, like I said earlier, this is started changing, and there's a response. People are saying that this central control of how the chain of influence will happen, this is leading to a lot more problems, because people are bringing in their vested interest, and that jigsaw puzzle, which is, as it is pretty fragile, which is the whole ecology of the world, okay, where humans are the only animals which is really spoiling the show, that is getting really, really distorted. So today, now there's an alternative way of doing business. And in this alternative way of doing business, which came up with the open source movement, and people saying that, let's farm out the work, let's democratize this whole thing. Let there not be any central control of creation of, say, an operating system. And Linux is a wonderful example. There is not a single person who can individually go and wield control over how Linux would work. Okay, it is completely democratized. You can also participate in the development of Linux. You can go and discuss with all the software developers. There are thousands and thousands of software developers from different parts of the world sitting down and coming up with a solution together with no real central control. And that will happen in architecture also, for sure. Okay. So, in fact, I'll tell you a secret that you must have seen, that a lot of these companies who are currently providing solution for architects, they have started on a subscription model, and they are telling the architects that, you better take a subscription from us. We don't sell perpetual license anymore. And the reason is very banal, because these companies know that the open source way of developing software has started coming in 2, 3 years, 4 years down the line. They will be quite unbeatable, and these large companies who were trying to centrally control the whole chain of events, they are not going to really be so influential anymore. So they are trying to see what is the best way they can pretend that they can actually give control back to the users, and they'll say, you don't have to pay the whole thing, you can just pay the annual subscription and you will be a servant for whatever you're doing. No, you are going to be their servant, because they are trying to hold central control over whatever you do. So one reason why TAD is free is because TAD will also, very soon, it is going to become open source, and I'll be inviting others, rather I should not use the word I anymore. All of us together will start nibbling at what else we need to do with TAD, and it will grow quite a lot like the way Linux has grown, and it's unstoppable. You can't say that I'll somehow other figure out a way by which Linux can be stopped in its track, and I can go back to that industrial age where I'll be like that central control over the rest of the chain of events over there. So the world now has got alternatives of how things can be done, and in that process, all of you who are listening to this, you have to ask yourself, in which direction would you want to fit yourself into? So when I said that TAD is free, it is not because it's got any deficiencies or anything. Nothing of that sort. It was used in a lot of very real world projects, and I'm sure if I was just a pure theoretician, some builder will come with probably a butter knife also and slit my throat, metaphorically. Who has got the time to sit down and listen to all these theories, right? So that definitely has a lot of value. Of course, a lot needs to be done. A lot has already got done. A lot more needs to be done. I am not denying that. That is why it will get open source and people will contribute to it. How does value emerge in such a situation? So this kind of phenomena where lots of people are joining hands is actually nothing new. You see a flock of birds. Okay, each bird is contributing only a small amount of intelligence or whatever it is doing, navigation skills, but the entire flock of birds is moving around gracefully like a flying carpet over there, and there are millions of birds over there. A few birds may get exhausted or they're outliers and they don't want to participate in the flock. Fine, no problem. Some of them are weak or they have some illness and they will fall off from the flock. Doesn't matter. The flock still remains over there. So this process of emergence, it's called, where there is no real central control. If you look at that flock of birds, you will not see that one bird who's actually the one which is really controlling the flock. Nothing of that sort. And this is seen time and again in many of these various handling of the dynamic jigsaw puzzles, which I was referring to earlier. So, in short, what I'm trying to say here is that we are at a very nice cusp between an old way of looking at software and computers and linguistic challenges which we have, and now there is a new way by which we can actually go and discuss our, put our minds together and think through problems and solve our problems and deposit some information for people to really sit and examine for themselves later on. And that's a age which we are soon entering into. In 2-3 years time, this would be a very strong way by which value will happen even in architecture. Architecture is unfortunately one of the oldest subjects, and it's pretty archaic the way we go around handling our information, but that's a separate topic. I've discussed that separately, and that's one of the reasons why TAD exists, because it is giving a linguistic base which allows discussions to happen very well in the subject. So I hope in this passionate talk I've been able to put together a few points on why we have to really think about free software which will add value. I'll have other videos which will explain the revenue model. It's not that I'm saying that no, everything will be gratis and we are all going to be social workers or nothing of that sort. Even I would be making money. The entity working with which is developing TAD will make money. Linux is a free operating system. They make money. There is a company called Red Hat which makes a huge amount of money. Okay, so it's not that don't conflate the two things. Okay, how free software and open source software, how revenue gets generated is a separate discussion which I'll probably make another video on that. But the core idea is to start understanding there's a new kind of way of getting value deposited in the world and created to solve the problems of the world. So I hope you all can use TAD and let's all put our heads together and really give our great grandchildren a much better future than the way we are going around proceeding with our work. Thank you very much.